The Arizona dust settled around Ayana's bare feet as she stumbled through the canyon, her white ceremonial dress torn and stained with blood that wasn't hers. Behind her, the screams had finally stopped. The soldiers had come during her wedding feast, their rifles speaking the only language they knew. Her groom lay dead beside the sacred fire, along with half her village. She'd run when her grandmother pushed her toward the rocks, whispering one word: live. Now, 3 days later, she stood at the edge of a dried creek bed, swaying from thirst and exhaustion. The gold wedding necklace her mother had worn, and her mother before that, hung heavy against her chest, the last thing of value she possessed. In the distance, she could see smoke rising from a homestead. White man's territory. Every instinct screamed danger, but her body was failing. She had no choice. Before we continue with Ayana's journey, I'd like to ask you to take a moment to subscribe to our channel and leave a like on this video. Your support truly matters and motivates us to bring you more quality content like this. I'd love to know, where are you listening to this story from today? The ranch house sat quiet in the afternoon heat, its wood weathered grey by the relentless sun. Ayana approached on unsteady legs, one hand clutching the fence post for support. Through the open stable door she could see a man working, broad-shouldered, his shirt dark with sweat as he brushed down a massive roan stallion. She'd seen maybe 35 summers on him, his face partially obscured by a worn hat. "Mister!" she called out, her English rough but clear. Her father had insisted she learn, said it might save her life one day. "I trade. Gold for water, food." The man turned slowly, and Ayana found herself looking into the bluest eyes she'd ever seen, the color of desert sky at dawn. His face was weathered, with lines around his eyes and a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. His hands, she noticed, stopped moving on the horse's flank, but he didn't reach for the rifle propped against the stable wall. "Gold isn't what you need here," he said quietly, his voice like gravel and honey mixed together. "You need a doctor, looks like. And about a week's worth of meals." Ayana's hand tightened on her necklace. "I pay. I don't take charity. Didn't offer charity." He set down the brush and walked toward her with measured steps like approaching a wounded animal. Up close, he was even larger than she'd thought, tall and powerfully built, with muscles that spoke of years of hard labor. But his movements were careful, unthreatening. "Name's Jacob Mercer. This is my land. I could use help with cooking, mending. Horse needs gentling too. She won't let anyone but me near her. You know horses." "I was raised with them," Ayana said, her pride overriding her caution. "Apache ponies are finest in—" Her words cut off as her knees buckled. Jacob caught her before she hit the ground, his arms solid and steady. "Easy now. When's the last time you ate?" 3 days." The world tilted, and she felt herself lifted as if she weighed nothing. "Put me down. I can walk." "Not arguing that you can," he said, carrying her toward the house, "but you don't have to. Not right now." She should have fought, should have demanded her dignity, but exhaustion crashed over her like a flood, and for the first time since the massacre, she let herself stop fighting, just for a moment, just until her strength returned. Jacob's house was spare but clean, a main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area, and 2 doors leading to what she assumed were bedrooms. He set her carefully in a chair at the wooden table and moved to the pump, filling a tin cup with water. "Slow," he instructed as she reached for it. "You'll make yourself sick." The water was cool and sweet, better than anything she'd ever tasted. Ayana forced herself to sip, though she wanted to drain the cup in one gulp. Jacob moved around the kitchen with surprising efficiency for such a large man, cutting bread and cheese, warming leftover stew on the stove. "The dress," he said, not looking at her directly. "That's ceremonial. You were married? Was to be." Ayana's voice came out flat, empty. "Soldiers came, white men with hate in their hearts and whiskey on their breath. They didn't care about treaties or sacred days." Jacob's jaw tightened, but he only nodded. I got a sister's dress you can wear. She passed 2 years back. Fever took her. You're about her size, I'd reckon. I'm sorry for your loss. Seems we've both lost plenty. He set the bowl in front of her, along with a plate of bread. Eat what you can. Room off to the right is yours if you want it. I'll bed down in the barn while you're here. This is your home, Ayana protested. I won't. You're not property. You're a person, Jacob interrupted, his blue eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. And persons deserve privacy and respect. That's how it works under my roof. Something in her chest cracked open at those words. She'd been prepared for many things when she'd approached this ranch. Violence, contempt, being turned away. She hadn't been prepared for simple human decency. I'll work hard, she promised. I'll earn my place. Never doubted it. Jacob grabbed his hat from a peg by the door. I'll be in the stable if you need anything. Door locks from the inside. Use it. There's rough men around these parts sometimes. After he left, Ayana ate slowly, forcing her shrunken stomach to accept the food. Then she explored her new domain with careful steps. The bedroom was small but comfortable, a real bed with a quilt, a washstand with a ceramic basin, even a mirror on the wall. She caught her reflection and barely recognized herself. Hollowed cheeks, eyes too large in her thin face, her long black hair matted with dust and blood. In the corner, she found a trunk. Inside lay dresses in soft blues and greens, and underneath a photograph. A young woman with kind eyes and Jacob's same stubborn chin smiled out from the frame. His sister, the one who died and left him alone in this empty house. Ayana carefully refolded the dresses and closed the trunk. She understood something about Jacob Mercer now. He'd loved and lost, just as she had, and he'd kept living anyway, kept this place running, kept being decent when the world had given him every reason to be cruel. She could do the same. That night, she washed as best she could with the water and cloth Jacob had left, then dressed in one of the simple blue dresses. It fit well enough, though she kept her moccasins. They were worn but familiar. Her wedding necklace she tucked under the neckline, close to her heart. Some things you didn't let go of, no matter how much they hurt to hold. The next morning, Ayana woke before dawn, old habits from a lifetime of rising with the sun. She found Jacob already in the kitchen, working on something at the stove. "Coffee?" he offered. "Fair warning, I make it strong enough to strip paint. I drink it." She accepted the cup and took a sip. It was indeed strong, bitter and hot but good. "You're up early." "Cattle don't wait for a man to sleep in." He gestured to the table where he'd laid out bread, butter and jam. "Help yourself. Then if you're feeling steady, I could use those hands you promised." The days fell into a rhythm. Ayana cooked stews and bread at first, then venison steaks the way her mother had taught her, with herbs gathered from the hills. She mended Jacob's shirts, sewn with stitches so neat he remarked they were better than anything he'd paid for in town. She swept and organized, turning the lonely house into something that felt almost like a home. But the real work happened in the stable. The roan mare was magnificent, 16 hands of solid muscle and wild spirit. Jacob called her Tempest. And the name fit. She'd been caught running with a Mustang herd 6 months back, and she still bucked at the sight of a saddle. "She trusts me some," Jacob explained, running his hand along the horse's neck. "But not enough. I'd hoped time would settle her, but she's got steel in her spine, won't be broken, only partnered with." Ayana approached slowly, making herself small and quiet. She'd learned from her father's best horseman, the old ways, where you spoke to the animal's spirit, not just its body. She began to hum, low and rhythmic, an Apache song her grandmother had sung. Tempest's ears flicked forward, her wild eyes fixed on Ayana with bright intelligence. "Easy, sister," Ayana whispered in her own language. "I know what it is to be trapped, to want to run. I know what it is to be afraid." Over the following weeks, something shifted. Ayana would spend hours in the stable, just being present with the mare. Not demanding, not forcing, just being. Jacob would watch sometimes from the fence, his expression unreadable. "You've got a gift," he said one evening, as Tempest finally accepted an apple from Ayana's palm. "Never seen her take to someone so quick. She knows I understand her." Ayana stroked the mare's velvety nose. Some creatures recognize their own kind. Jacob was quiet for a long moment. Suppose that's true. Their eyes met across the stable, and something passed between them. A recognition of shared wounds, of survival against odds that should have broken them. Ayana looked away first, her heart beating faster than it should. This was dangerous, getting comfortable here, starting to care, but danger, she was learning, sometimes wore a kind face. One afternoon, 3 weeks into her stay, Jacob came in from the north pasture with blood streaming down his arm. A fence had collapsed, and the wire had caught him deep, tearing through shirt and skin. "Sit," Ayana commanded, pointing to a chair. Her healer training took over, the knowledge her grandmother had passed down through generations. "I need clean cloth and whiskey." "It's just a scratch," Jacob protested, but he sat anyway. "It's deep. Could turn bad if not cleaned proper." She gathered supplies with efficient hands, then returned to kneel beside him. "This will hurt. Won't be the first time." But his jaw clenched when she poured the whiskey over the wound. Ayana worked quickly, cleaning away blood and dirt, her fingers gentle but thorough. This close, she could see the texture of his skin, the small scars that mapped a life of hard work. Could smell his scent, leather and sweat, and something uniquely him that made her aware of her own breathing. "You've done this before," Jacob observed, his voice tight with pain, "many times. My grandmother was a healer. She taught me to see what others miss." Ayana began stitching, her needle sure and steady. "Go slow. It hurts, I know, but quick work makes for clean healing." "I can take it." But his free hand gripped the chair arm until his knuckles went white. When she finished and wrapped the wound with clean bandaging, they stayed there for a moment. Her kneeling beside him, him looking down at her with something in his eyes that made her stomach flutter. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Seems I owe you more than just room and board now." "We don't keep ledgers here," Ayana replied, echoing his own philosophy back to him. "That's not how it works." His hand came up slowly, giving her time to move away if she wanted. When she didn't, his calloused fingers touched her cheek with surprising gentleness. "You're not what I expected when you came walking up that day." "What did you expect?" "Someone temporary, someone passing through." His thumb traced along her cheekbone. "Not someone who'd make this place feel less empty." Ayana's breath caught. She should pull away, should remember that attachments led to pain, that everything she'd ever loved had been taken from her. But she was tired of running, tired of being afraid. "Jacob," she whispered, and his name on her lips felt like a prayer and a promise all at once. He leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to refuse. When their lips met, it was soft and questioning, a first kiss that tasted of coffee and possibility. Ayana's hand came up to rest against his chest, feeling his heart pound as hard as hers. When they finally pulled apart, Jacob rested his forehead against hers. "I've got no right to ask you to stay beyond our agreement, but I'm asking anyway. For how long? Long as you want. Forever, if you'd have it." His voice was rough with emotion. "I see a woman worth building a life with, if you see a man worth trusting with yours." Ayana thought of the massacre, the running, the fear, and then she thought of quiet mornings over coffee, of teaching Tempest to trust, of Jacob's steadiness and respect, of how he'd never once treated her as less than his equal, how he'd given her space to heal and time to choose. "Together," she said finally, letting the word carry all her hope and fear. "We face it together." Together, Jacob agreed, and kissed her again, deeper this time, with all the loneliness of his past 2 years and all the promise of their shared future. But the past, they would both learn, didn't let go so easily. The trouble came on a Saturday, when Jacob had gone to town for supplies. Ayana was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard hoofbeats, too many, coming too fast. 5 riders crested the hill, and her blood turned to ice. She recognized the leader immediately, Captain Marcus Dennison, the officer who'd led the massacre at her wedding. His pale eyes found her across the distance, and his smile was a predator's grin. "Well, well," he called out, dismounting with lazy confidence. His men spread out, surrounding the yard. "Looks like we missed one. Boys, seems we found ourselves a little Apache squaw playing house." Ayana stood her ground, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "This is private land. You're trespassing." "That's so?" Dennison walked closer, his hand resting on his pistol. "See, we've been tracking you since that mess at the reservation. Can't have witnesses running around telling tales about what happened. Bad for army relations, you understand. I've told no one. Yet. But you will." He reached for her arm. "Best you come quiet. Make it easier on yourself." "Take your hands off her." The voice came from behind them, cold and hard as winter stone. Jacob stood at the corner of the house, his rifle leveled at Dennison's chest. His injured arm was steady, his blue eyes blazing with controlled fury. "This doesn't concern you, rancher," Dennison said, but his hand fell away from Ayana. "Army business. The woman is under my protection. That makes it my business." Jacob's finger rested on the trigger. "And I don't see any arrest warrants. Just looks like 5 men threatening an unarmed woman on private property." "You really want to die for some Indian girl? I'll die before I hurt you," Jacob said. But his eyes were on Ayana when he spoke, and she understood he was telling her something important. "But I won't die today, and neither will she. So you got 2 choices, Captain. Ride out now, or find out just how good a shot an Arizona rancher can be." The standoff stretched tight as wire. Ayana could see the calculation in Dennison's eyes. 5 against 1. But they were in the open, and Jacob had cover. And there was something in the rancher's stance that spoke of a man who'd been to war and back. "This isn't over," Dennison finally said, mounting up. "We'll be back with proper authority. You do that, and I'll be ready with witnesses and a lawyer." Jacob didn't lower the rifle until they'd ridden out of sight. Then he turned to Ayana, his face pale. "You hurt?" "No, but Jacob—" "I know." He set the rifle aside and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight enough that she could feel him trembling. "I know they'll come back, and I know what they did to your people. I'm so damn sorry I wasn't there to stop it." Ayana buried her face in his chest, breathing in his scent, letting his solid presence ground her. "You can't fight the whole army. Watch me!" He pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face. "But we need to be smart, need to get you legal protection, witnesses. I know a judge in Tucson, good man who actually gives a damn about justice. And I've got friends, other ranchers, townfolk who know me. We build a case that you're under my protection as my—" He trailed off, and Ayana saw the moment he made his decision. "As my wife," Jacob finished. "Marry me, Ayana, not just as protection, though God knows I want to keep you safe, but because I love you, because you made this empty house a home, because you're the bravest person I've ever met, and I want to spend whatever days I've got left making sure you smile more than you cry." Ayana's eyes filled with tears, the first she'd let fall since the massacre. "I was meant to marry once before. It ended in blood and death. I know, and I can't promise there won't be danger. Can't promise easy days ahead." Jacob's thumbs wiped away her tears with infinite gentleness. "But I can promise I'll fight for you, stand with you, respect you, love you with everything I've got. That enough?" She thought of her grandmother's last words. live. She'd been surviving, but Jacob offered something more, a chance to truly live again, to love again, to build again, to be more than just her trauma. "Yes," Ayana whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Jacob let out a breath like he'd been holding it for weeks, then kissed her with a passion that made her dizzy. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "We do this proper," he said. "Tomorrow, we ride to town, get the preacher, file the papers, make it legal and binding. Then we visit that judge, get protection orders in place, and if Dennison comes back, we face it together," Ayana finished. "Together," Jacob agreed. They married the next morning in the small church in town, with the preacher and 2 rancher friends serving as witnesses. Ayana wore one of Jacob's sister's dresses, the green one that brought out her eyes, and carried wildflowers Jacob had picked at dawn. The ceremony was simple and quick, but when Jacob slipped his mother's gold band onto her finger and promised to honor her all his days, Ayana felt something broken inside her begin to heal. Afterward, they rode to Tucson and spent 2 days with Judge Harrison, building their case. The judge was as good as Jacob promised, a white-haired man with sharp eyes who listened to Ayana's testimony about the massacre with barely contained fury. "Captain Dennison's been on my radar for other complaints," Harrison told them, making notes. "But the Army protects its own. Still, with your statement and your new legal status, Mrs. Mercer, we can make his life difficult if he bothers you again. I'll send an official notice that any action against you will be seen as harassment of a lawful citizen under federal protection." It wasn't perfect. It wasn't justice for her murdered family. But it was something. They rode back to the ranch in the golden light of evening. Ayana seated in front of Jacob on his big roan gelding, his arms secure around her waist. When they crested the hill and saw their home in the valley below, the house with smoke rising from the chimney, tempest running in the pasture, Ayana felt peace settle over her for the first time in months. "This is ours now," Jacob said quietly. "All of it. You're not a guest anymore, not hired help. This is your home, your land, your future." Ayana leaned back against his solid chest. "Ours," she corrected. "Everything we build from here, we build together." That night, as stars wheeled overhead and a cool breeze whispered through the canyon, Jacob carried her over the threshold of their home. He set her down gently in their bedroom, no longer the guest room, but theirs, and lit the lamp with careful hands. "I need you to know," he said, turning to face her. "We don't have to. I mean, you're my wife in every way that matters. But if you need time—" Ayana stopped his words with a kiss, pouring into it everything she felt, gratitude and desire and love, so fierce it scared her. When she pulled back, she saw her own emotions reflected in his eyes. A young Apache bride was stranded with a seasoned cowboy. She whispered against his lips, remembering that desperate girl who'd stumbled onto his land weeks ago, and that night turned her into a woman. Not because he'd taken anything from her, but because he'd given her everything: safety, respect, choice, the freedom to heal at her own pace, and the courage to risk her heart again. Jacob kissed her with a tenderness that made her tremble, his calloused hands gentle as he traced the line of her jaw, her throat, her shoulders. "Tell me if anything hurts. Tell me if you want to stop." "I trust you," Ayana breathed, and meant it with her whole soul. They came together slowly, reverently, not in desperate passion, but in careful exploration, learning each other's bodies and boundaries. Jacob was patient and attentive, stopping whenever she tensed, whispering words of love and reassurance against her skin. And Ayana, who'd thought herself broken beyond repair, discovered she could still feel pleasure, still give herself completely to another person. Afterward, They lay tangled together in the moonlight, Jacob's fingers tracing idle patterns on her back, while she listened to his heartbeat slow beneath her ear. "My grandmother told me stories," Ayana said quietly, "about how the first people were created in pairs, each one perfect for the other. I thought those were just tales for children." "Maybe they were true," Jacob replied. "Maybe some souls are meant to find each other, even through fire and loss." "You believe that?" "I believe in you, in us, in what we're building here." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "Rest now, wife. Tomorrow we start our real life together." Ayana smiled against his chest and let sleep take her, feeling safer than she had since childhood. The months that followed weren't easy. Denison never returned, but other troubles found them. A harsh winter that killed 3 cattle, a prairie fire that threatened the house, the constant hard work of maintaining a ranch. But they faced everything together, their bond strengthening with each challenge overcome. Ayana proved herself invaluable. Her knowledge of the land and its plants saved them through drought. Her riding skills helped round up strays. Her steady presence kept Jacob grounded when frustration mounted. And Jacob gave her something she'd thought lost forever, a place to belong, a partner who saw her strength rather than her scars. By spring, Ayana was teaching local Apache children to read and write, using the ranch as a safe haven for those fleeing worse conditions. Jacob supported every decision, even when it put them at odds with less tolerant neighbors. Together, they became known as champions of fair treatment and justice, a reputation that slowly changed hearts and minds. And when Ayana discovered she carried their first child, Jacob wept with joy and placed his hand over the small swell of her belly with a reverence that made her heart overflow. "Our baby will grow up knowing peace," she told him, "knowing love from both sides of their heritage, never having to choose between worlds. And they'll know their mother is the strongest woman in the territory," Jacob added, kissing her forehead, "and their father would move mountains to keep them safe." A year after that desperate girl had traded her last possession for survival, Ayana stood on the porch of her home, watching Jacob teach their daughter to ride on Gentle Tempest, the wild mare now tamed by love and patience. The sunset painted the canyon walls gold and crimson, and somewhere in the distance she could hear the evening song of her people drifting on the wind. She was Apache. She was a rancher's wife. She was a mother and a teacher and a survivor. She was all these things at once, no longer torn between worlds, but bridging them with courage and grace. And she was loved, wholly, completely, without reservation. Jacob looked up from the paddock and caught her eye, his smile bright as summer sun. He mouthed the word that had become their anchor, their promise. Together. Ayana smiled back and touched the gold wedding necklace at her throat, her mother's and grandmother's before her, now paired with Jacob's mother's ring. Past and present, tradition and new beginning, all woven into one life. "Together," she whispered back, and the wind carried her word across the land they'd made their own. The autumn winds brought more than just cooling temperatures to the Mercer Ranch. They carried rumors, whispers that traveled from town to ranch to campfire, growing more twisted with each telling. Ayana heard them when she rode into town for supplies, saw them in the sideways glances from women who'd once smiled politely. "That Apache woman has Jacob Mercer under some kind of spell," one woman muttered to her companion outside the general store, not quite quiet enough. No white man in his right mind would choose one of them otherwise. Ayana kept her head high and continued loading supplies into the wagon, though each word landed like a small cut. She'd grown a thicker skin over the past year, but some wounds still stung fresh. What hurt more was the distance growing between some of the neighboring ranchers and Jacob. Men who'd once helped with roundups now found excuses to be elsewhere. Invitations to town gatherings dried up like creek beds in August. Jacob noticed, of course. He always noticed. Tom Henderson crossed the street to avoid speaking to me today, he said that evening, his jaw tight as he brushed down his horse. We've been friends 15 years, fought together in the border wars. Ayanna continued mixing feed, her movements steady despite the guilt churning in her stomach. This is because of me, because you married me. This is because some folks are small-minded and scared of what they don't understand. Jacob set down the brush and turned to face her. And I don't give a damn what they think, you hear me? Not one damn. But you're losing friends, losing respect in town. I'm gaining a life worth living. He crossed to her, tilting her chin up so she met his eyes. Before you, I was just going through motions, working myself to exhaustion so I didn't have to feel how empty everything was. You brought light back into my world, Ayanna. That's worth more than 1,000 fair-weather friends. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that love was enough against the tide of prejudice. But she'd learned too young how hate could destroy everything in its path. That night, as they lay in bed, Ayanna traced the scar on Jacob's shoulder, a memento from a cavalry saber during his army days. "Tell me about the war," she said quietly. "You never speak of it." Jacob was silent so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I enlisted young, 19, full of ideas about glory and duty. They sent us west to pacify the territories." His voice went hollow. "I followed orders, did things I'm not proud of, saw things that still wake me up some nights." "What changed you?" "A woman." He pulled her closer, his breath warm against her hair. "Little Apache girl, couldn't have been more than 8. We'd just burned her village on orders. Military target, they called it. She came out of the smoke, carrying her baby brother, both of them covered in ash. She looked at me with these huge eyes, and I saw a person. Not an enemy, not a savage. Just a terrified child trying to save her family." Ayanna's throat tightened. "What did you do?" "Gave them my canteen. My rations, let them slip away into the rocks when my commanding officer wasn't looking." Jacob's arms tightened around her. "Got disciplined for losing track of hostiles. Didn't care. Finished my service and came out here, swore I'd never raise a hand against innocent people again, no matter what uniform I wore or orders I received." "Is that why you helped me? Guilt?" "No." He rolled to face her, his blue eyes intense in the moonlight. "I helped you because it was right, because you reminded me that courage isn't about following orders. It's about standing up when it cost you something, and I married you because you're the strongest, most beautiful soul I've ever known. Those are two different things, and you need to understand that." Ayanna kissed him then, pouring her gratitude and love into the connection. Jacob responded with the careful passion she'd come to crave, his touch both tender and possessive, always making sure she felt cherished rather than claimed. Later, wrapped in quilts and satisfaction, she whispered against his chest, "I'm afraid sometimes. Afraid that one day you'll regret choosing me over an easier life." "I'll die before I hurt you," Jacob murmured, the phrase that had become his oath to her. "And I'll never regret you. Never. You understand?" She nodded, letting his certainty quiet her fears, at least for tonight. The trouble came 3 weeks later during the first snow of winter. Ayanna was alone when the riders appeared. Jacob had gone to check the northern fence line and wouldn't be back until sunset. She was working in the barn, treating Tempest's split hoof, when she heard the horses approach. 4 men, rough-looking and armed. Not soldiers this time, but something potentially worse, bounty hunters by the look of them. The leader, a scarred man with cold eyes, dismounted slowly. "We're looking for Jacob Mercer," he said, his hand resting on his pistol. "Heard he's got himself an Indian wife." Ayanna straightened, keeping the work table between them. "He's not here. State your business and leave. Our business is with him, but maybe you can help." The man pulled out a paper, a wanted poster. Ayanna's heart sank when she saw her own face staring back at her, younger but unmistakable. Seems there's a reward for information about Apache survivors from a certain incident last year. Army wants to tie up loose ends about what really happened. I don't know what you're talking about. That's so. He took a step closer. Because you look an awful lot like this woman here. And I got a memory for faces. Saw you once before at a trading post near the reservation, just before everything went to hell. Ayana's hand slowly moved toward the rifle leaning against the wall, the one Jacob had taught her to shoot over months of patient practice. You're mistaken. Now leave my property. Your property? The man laughed. That's rich. Indian squaw playing at being a rancher's wife. His companions spread out, flanking the barn entrance. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to come with us, answer some questions for the army. Your husband gets to keep his ranch and his good name. Everyone wins. Except me. Except you, the man agreed. But that's just how it goes. Your kind should have stayed on the reservations where you belong. Ayana's fingers closed on the rifle stock. My kind survived while men like you tried to erase us. We're still here, still fighting, and I won't go quietly into whatever hell you've planned. She brought the rifle up fast, chambering a round with the smooth action Jacob had drilled into her. So here's what's actually going to happen. You're going to mount up and ride out. If you come back, I'll shoot first and ask questions later. My husband taught me well. I won't miss. The scarred man's eyes narrowed. Bold talk, but there's 4 of us and 1 of you. 3 of us, a new voice called from behind them. Ayana's heart leaped. Jacob stood in the barn doorway, his rifle leveled, his face set in hard lines. Beside him stood Samuel Chen, their neighbor from the eastern property, a Chinese immigrant who'd faced his own share of prejudice and had become one of their few true allies. And I count 3, said another voice. Maria Rodriguez stepped from the tack room, her shotgun cradled with the ease of someone who knew how to use it. The Mexican widow who ran the adjacent ranch had been teaching Ayana to make proper tortillas just last week. The bounty hunters found themselves surrounded, outgunned, and suddenly reconsidering their odds. This isn't over, the scarred man said, backing toward his horse. That reward is still good. Others will come. Then we'll be ready, Jacob said coldly. And next time, I won't be so polite about trespassers. This is Texas, boys. We protect our own, and we don't take kindly to threats. Now get. After they'd ridden off, Jacob pulled Ayana into his arms, crushing her against his chest. She could feel his heart hammering, could feel the tremor in his strong hands. When I crested that hill and saw those men at our barn, his voice cracked. I've never been so scared in my life. I had it handled, Ayana said, but she was shaking too, the adrenaline finally catching up with her. I know you did. Saw you standing there like some warrior queen, rifle in hand. Jacob pulled back to look at her with fierce pride. But we can't keep doing this, can't keep waiting for the next threat. We need to end this properly. Samuel nodded grimly. Judge Harrison can only do so much. We need higher authority, federal marshals maybe, or a direct petition to Washington. I know someone, Maria said quietly. My late husband, he had connections. His brother is a senator, progressive man who actually cares about justice. If I write him, explain the situation. Would he help? Ayana asked, hardly daring to hope. For me? Maybe. For the right cause. Maria's dark eyes flashed. Definitely. He hates corruption, hates seeing the army abuse its power. And he's got influence. If anyone can get those trumped-up charges dismissed and that bounty removed, it's him. Over the next weeks, they mounted their campaign. Maria wrote letters. Samuel rode to neighboring counties, gathering support from other immigrants and mixed families who understood what it meant to be targeted for who you were. Jacob traveled to Tucson repeatedly, building a case with Judge Harrison that documented every threat, every incident of harassment. And Ayana did what she'd been avoiding. She wrote down her testimony about the massacre. Every horrible detail, every name she could remember, every crime committed by Dennison and his men. It took 3 days of reliving nightmares, with Jacob sitting beside her, holding her hand when the memories became too much. "You're the bravest person I know," he told her when she finally finished, her hand cramped from writing. "Facing this down instead of running. Some warriors fight with weapons. You're fighting with truth." "I'm terrified," Ayanna admitted. "What if it's not enough? What if they come anyway? Then we fight together, but I don't think it'll come to that." Jacob gathered the pages carefully. "This testimony, it's damning, describes war crimes, violations of treaties, murder of civilians. If this gets in front of the right people, Dennison's career is over. He'll be too busy defending himself to come after you." Spring brought their answer, a thick envelope with an official seal. Maria's brother-in-law had come through. The testimony had been reviewed by a federal commission, Dennison was under investigation, and all charges or bounties related to Ayanna had been officially dismissed. She was recognized as a lawful citizen, married to Jacob Mercer, with full legal protections. More than that, there was compensation, a grant of additional land and resources for their ranch, in recognition of the wrongs done to her family and tribe. Ayanna read the letter 3 times before she believed it was real. "It's over," she whispered. "It's actually over." Jacob swept her up in his arms, spinning her around the kitchen while she laughed and cried at once. When he set her down, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You're free," he said, cupping her face in his hands. "Completely, legally free. No one can touch you now. You're safe." "We're safe," Ayanna corrected, pulling him down for a kiss. "Together." That evening, they celebrated with Samuel and Maria, along with a few other neighbors who'd proven themselves true friends. The house filled with laughter and music. Samuel played a haunting melody on his erhu, while Maria taught everyone a Mexican folk dance. Later, after their guests had departed and the house was quiet again, Jacob led Ayanna outside to watch the stars. "I've been thinking," he said, pulling her back against his chest, "about expanding. Maybe building a school on our land, a real one, where Apache children and white children can learn together, where immigrants' kids don't have to hide who they are." Ayanna turned in his arms, her heart swelling. "You'd do that." "We'd do that," Jacob corrected. "This is our land, our future. And I want to build something that matters, something that honors what you survived and makes sure others don't have to endure the same." "A school for everyone?" Ayanna murmured, the dream taking shape in her mind. "Taught in multiple languages, respecting different traditions. With you as the head teacher, of course. You're already doing it informally, might as well make it official." They stood there in the darkness, planning their future, dreaming bigger than either had dared before. And for the first time since the massacre, Ayanna felt truly free, not just legally but in her soul. Free to hope, to build, to love without fear. "Thank you," she whispered to the stars, to her ancestors, to whatever force had led her to Jacob's door that desperate day. "Thank you for giving me this second chance." Jacob kissed her temple. "Thank you for taking it, for choosing to live, for choosing me. Always you," Ayanna promised. "Together." "Together," Jacob echoed, and the word was both ending and beginning, a promise that would carry them through whatever came next. Winter arrived early that year, bringing with it the kind of cold that settled into bones and refused to leave. Ayanna woke one December morning to find Frost painting intricate patterns on the bedroom window, and Jacob's side of the bed empty. She found him in the kitchen, staring at a telegram with a pale face. "What's wrong?" Ayanna asked, wrapping her shawl tighter against the chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Jacob looked up, and she saw something in his eyes that frightened her. Grief, guilt, and a terrible conflict. It's my brother, Thomas. He's dying. Consumption. Asking for me to come to Missouri. Ayana's stomach dropped. Jacob rarely spoke of his family back east, only that they disapproved of his choices, his move west, his entire life. You should go. It's a 3-week journey, maybe more with winter storms. And leaving you here. Samuel and Maria will check on me daily. The ranch can survive a few weeks. Ayana crossed to him, taking his hands. He's your brother, Jacob. You'll regret it forever if you don't go. Jacob's jaw worked. They won't accept you. My family, they're good people in many ways, but they're traditional, set in their thinking. When I wrote about our marriage, my father sent one letter back, said I'd made my choice and was no longer welcome in his house. The words hit like physical blows, but Ayana kept her voice steady. Then you go alone. Make your peace with your brother. That's what matters. I don't want to leave you, and I don't want to face them without you by my side. Jacob pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. You're my wife, my partner. Hiding that, even for a few weeks, feels like a betrayal. It's not hiding, it's honoring family in their time of grief. Ayana kissed him softly. Your brother is dying. He needs you. Go. The argument continued for 2 days, but Ayana held firm. Finally, Jacob agreed, but only after extracting promises that she'd stay armed, keep Tempest saddled and ready, and send word immediately if any trouble arose. The morning he left, snow was falling in thick, heavy flakes. Jacob held Ayana for a long moment on the porch, his breath frosting in the cold air. I'll be back before you know it, he promised. 3 weeks, maybe 4 at most. And when you return, we start building that school. Ayana touched his face, memorizing every line and scar. We've got a future to create, remember? Jacob kissed her fiercely, desperately, like a man afraid of what he might find when he let go. Then he mounted his horse and rode into the swirling white, looking back 3 times before the snow swallowed him completely. Ayana stood on the porch until she couldn't see him anymore. One hand pressed to her belly, where a secret had been growing for weeks now. News she'd planned to share, but hadn't found the right moment. Now it would wait until his return. Your father will be back soon, she whispered to the tiny life inside her, and then we'll tell him together. The first week passed quietly. Samuel stopped by daily with supplies and firewood, his presence a comfort even though they often sat in companionable silence. Maria came twice, bringing fresh bread and gossip from town. That Henderson woman was asking about you, Maria reported, kneading dough at Ayana's kitchen table. Wanted to know how you were managing alone. What did you tell her? That you're tougher than half the men in this territory and twice as smart. Maria's eyes twinkled. She didn't like that much, but her daughter Sophia, that girl has a good heart. She was asking if you still give riding lessons. Ayana smiled. Sophia Henderson was Tom Henderson's youngest, a spirited 12-year-old who loved horses more than anything. Despite her father's coolness toward Jacob, Sophia had become one of Ayana's most eager students. Tell her to come by. I could use the company. The lessons became a highlight of Ayana's week. Sophia arrived bundled against the cold, her eyes bright with excitement as Ayana taught her advanced techniques, how to read a horse's mood, how to communicate with pressure and release rather than force. My pa says you learned from Apache horsemen, Sophia said one afternoon, pausing to catch her breath. Is that true? It is. My father was one of the best riders in our tribe. Ayana watched Sophia practice the techniques they'd covered. He taught me that horses aren't tools to be broken. They're partners to be understood. I wish I could learn everything you know. Sophia's face fell slightly. But Pa says, well, he says things. I know what he says. Ayana kept her voice gentle. And I understand. He's afraid of what he doesn't know, and that makes him say unkind things. But you're here anyway, which means you're braver than most adults. "You're not scary at all," Sophia said with the blunt honesty of youth. "You're the nicest teacher I've ever had, and Mr. Mercer, everyone says he's happier now than he's been in years. My ma says love does that to a person." Ayana's eyes stung with unexpected tears. "Your mother said that?" "Yes'm. She told Pa he was being foolish, that a man who fought beside him in war deserved better than cold shoulders and cross streets." Sophia grinned. They argued about it for hours. Ma won, though. She usually does. Perhaps, Ayana thought, there was more hope for change than she'd realized. Perhaps Jacob's love had rippled outward, touching more hearts than just hers. The second week brought a storm that lasted 3 days, howling wind and snow so thick you couldn't see the barn from the house. Ayana spent those days doing indoor tasks, mending clothes and organizing supplies, trying not to think about Jacob traveling through similar conditions. On the 4th day, when the storm finally broke, she woke to find 3 feet of fresh snow and an eerie silence. She bundled up and trudged to the barn to check on the horses, her breath clouding in the bitter air. Tempest nickered a greeting, and Ayana was feeding her when she heard the sound, faint but unmistakable. Crying, a child crying. Ayana grabbed the rifle and moved toward the sound, her heart pounding. Behind the barn, huddled against the wall and half buried in snow, was a small figure. A child, maybe 6 years old, with dark skin and terrified eyes. "Help!" the child whispered in broken English. "Please help!" Ayana didn't hesitate. She scooped the child up, a little girl, she realized, and carried her into the house. The girl was dangerously cold, her lips blue and her small body trembling violently. Ayana worked quickly, stripping off wet clothes and wrapping the child in warm blankets near the fire. She heated milk and spooned it slowly into the girl's mouth, murmuring soothing words in Apache. The girl's eyes widened. "You speak the old language?" "I do. What's your name, little one?" "Kimmy." The girl started crying again. "My family. We were traveling to relatives' land. Soldiers came, said we were off reservation, had to turn back. Papa argued. They... Ayana pulled the child close, her heart breaking for this echo of her own trauma. "Hush now. You're safe here. No one will hurt you." "Papa told me to run. I ran and ran until I couldn't anymore. Then the storm came." Kimmy clutched Ayana's dress. "Are you Apache too?" "I am. And this is my home. You'll stay here until we find your family." But finding Kimmy's family proved impossible. Samuel rode out to search and returned with grim news. He'd found tracks of a large group headed back toward the reservation, military escort forcing them along. No sign of anyone looking for a lost child. "They might think she's dead," Samuel said quietly. "Storm like that, a child alone, most wouldn't survive." Ayana looked at Kimmy, who was sleeping by the fire, her small face finally peaceful. "She stays here. If her family can be found, we'll reunite them. But until then, she's under my protection." "Jacob's protection, you mean?" Maria said gently. "The law will recognize his claim more readily than yours." "Then we tell them she's under our protection, together." Ayana's voice was fierce. "I won't let another Apache child suffer because of bureaucracy and prejudice." Kimmy settled into life on the ranch with the resilience of children everywhere. She followed Ayana around, learning to cook and clean and care for the animals. She learned English quickly, her small voice filling the empty house with questions and laughter. One afternoon, while Ayana was teaching her to braid her hair, Kimmy asked, "Will I live here forever?" Ayana paused, choosing her words carefully. "Would you like to? I miss my mama and papa, but they might be gone now." Kimmy's voice was matter-of-fact, in the way of children who've seen too much. "You're kind to me. And you speak our language. It feels safe here." "Then you'll stay as long as you need." Ayana finished the braid and turned Kimmy to face her. And when my husband returns, he'll help make sure you're protected and cared for. He's a good man. You'll like him. Will he like me? He'll love you, Ayana promised, hoping it was true. Jacob returned 3 weeks after he'd left, riding up to the house just as twilight painted the snow purple and gold. Ayana ran to meet him, Kimmy clutching her hand. Jacob dismounted slowly, his face gaunt and exhausted. But when he saw Ayana, his expression transformed, relief and love flooding his features. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "Missed you," he murmured into her hair. "Every damn day. I missed you too." Ayana pulled back to look at him. "How is your brother?" "Dead. I made it in time, barely. We talked, made our peace." Jacob's eyes were red-rimmed with grief and travel weariness. "And my father, he's not well either. Saw me but wouldn't speak. My mother, though, she held my hand when I left, said she was sorry for their hardness." "I'm so sorry, Jacob." "It is what it is." He noticed Kimmy for the first time, hiding partially behind Ayana's skirts. "And who's this?" "This is Kimmy. She needed a home. I told her we'd give her one." Ayana held her breath, waiting for his response. Jacob studied the child for a long moment, then he crouched down to her level, his voice gentle. "Hello, Kimmy. I'm Jacob. This is my house, and my wife's house. And if she says it's your home too, then it is. You understand?" Kimmy nodded shyly. "Good." Jacob stood and looked at Ayana with such love it made her chest ache. "You never stop surprising me, taking in strays, building family from loss." He pulled them both into a hug. "We'll make this work. Register her as our ward, get the legal protection in place. Together." "Together," Ayana agreed, tears streaming down her face. "Always together." That night, after Kimmy was asleep in the guest room and they were finally alone, Ayana took Jacob's hand and placed it on her belly. "There's something else," she whispered. "Something I learned while you were gone." Jacob's eyes widened as understanding dawned. I'm pregnant. About 3 months along." Ayana watched emotions flash across his face. Shock, joy, fear, wonder. "I wanted to tell you before you left, but the time wasn't right. And now—" Jacob kissed her, deep and passionate, and full of everything words couldn't express. When they finally broke apart, both were crying and laughing at once. "We're having a baby," he whispered, his hand reverent on her stomach. "Our baby. A new life. And we have Kimmy. We're building a family, Jacob. A real family. A family that chooses love over tradition, that stands together against the world." Jacob rested his forehead against hers. "I went back east expecting to find something I'd lost, but everything I need is right here. You, Kimmy, this baby, this life we're building." "No regrets?" Ayana asked softly. "Never, not a single one." He kissed her again, softer this time. "You're my home, Ayana. You and whatever family we create together. That's all I need." Later, wrapped in each other's arms, they talked late into the night, about names for the baby, about expanding the house, about the school they'd build and the future they'd create. About Kimmy and how to help her heal, about all the challenges still ahead and how they'd face them side by side. And for the first time, Ayana felt the full weight of hope. Not the fragile, desperate hope of survival, but the sturdy, unshakable hope of building something that would last, something worth fighting for. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Jacob replied. "From that first day you walked onto my land to whatever last day we're granted, together." "Together," Ayana agreed. "And let sleep take her, secure in the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new challenges but also new joys." And she'd face them all with Jacob at her side, just as they'd promised, just as they'd always promised. The winter gave way to spring with reluctant grace. the snow melting into rushing creeks that fed the parched earth. Ayana's pregnancy became obvious, her body changing in ways both beautiful and uncomfortable. Jacob treated her like spun glass, constantly hovering until she threatened to throw his own boots at him. "I'm pregnant, not broken," she told him one morning when he tried to carry her from the bedroom to the breakfast table. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." "Not my woman carrying my child," Jacob countered, but he set her down with a sheepish grin. "Can't help it. Every time I think about something going wrong, nothing will go wrong." Ayana cupped his face, making him look at her. "Maria has delivered dozens of babies. Your mother delivered 3 sons alone on a homestead. I have my grandmother's knowledge in my blood. We'll be fine." Kimmy bounded into the kitchen, her energy boundless as always. "Can we work with Tempest today? You promised I could try the saddle." "After breakfast and chores," Ayana said, ruffling the girl's hair. Kimmy had blossomed over the winter, her trauma slowly healing in the security of their home. She'd taken to calling Ayana mother and Jacob father, and neither of them had the heart to correct her. "I'll help with chores extra fast." Kimmy attacked her oatmeal with enthusiasm. Jacob watched the girl with soft eyes, then leaned over to whisper in Ayana's ear, "She's going to be a wonderful big sister." Ayana's hand moved instinctively to her swelling belly, where their daughter, she somehow knew it was a daughter, rolled and kicked with increasing frequency. "The baby is lucky to have her, and us." "And us," Jacob agreed, stealing a kiss before Kimmy could protest with dramatic gagging sounds. The days settled into a new rhythm. Jacob worked on expanding the house, adding 2 more rooms for the growing family. Samuel helped with the construction, and Maria stopped by regularly to check on Ayana's health and teach Kimmy to cook traditional Mexican dishes alongside Ayana's Apache recipes. Sophia Henderson became a regular visitor too, and gradually Tom Henderson himself started appearing, first making excuses about retrieving his daughter, then staying for coffee, finally offering genuine help with the construction. "I was wrong," he told Jacob one afternoon as they framed a new window. "About you, about your marriage. My wife made sure I understood just how wrong." He glanced toward where Ayana sat, teaching the girls to weave baskets. "You've built something good here, something that matters. And I'm man enough to admit when I've been a fool." Jacob clasped his friend's shoulder, years of hurt beginning to mend. "We all stumble. It's the getting back up that counts." Word of their school project had spread through the territory, and to Ayana's surprise, support came from unexpected places. A Chinese merchant donated books. A Mexican rancher offered to help build the schoolhouse. Even the town's minister, Father O'Brien, contributed supplies and volunteered to teach mathematics. "There's more good people than bad in this world," Maria observed one day as they sorted through donated materials. "Sometimes they just need someone brave enough to show them the way." "Jacob showed me," Ayana said softly. "When I had nothing, when I was ready to trade my last possession for a chance to survive, he saw a person worth saving, worth respecting. Now we're just paying that forward." Construction on the schoolhouse began in early May. The building would sit on the eastern edge of their property, close enough to home but far enough to give students' families privacy. It would have space for 20 students, with room to expand. Ayana worked alongside the men when she could, though Jacob limited her to light tasks. She painted, organized supplies, and planned curriculum with a passion that surprised her. Teaching had always been important in Apache culture. Passing down knowledge was sacred work. Now she'd do it in a way that honored both her heritage and the new world they were building. One afternoon, while painting the schoolhouse trim, she felt a sharp pain in her lower back. She paused, waiting for it to pass, but instead it intensified, a cramping sensation that made her gasp. "Ayana!" Jacob was at her side instantly, his face white. "What's wrong?" Nothing, just another pain, stronger this time, and then wetness between her legs, warm and alarming. "Oh, Maria!" Jacob shouted, sweeping Ayana into his arms. "Samuel, someone get Maria now!" The next hours blurred together in waves of pain and fear. It was too early. She wasn't due for another 2 months. Maria arrived and examined her with gentle, efficient hands. "The baby's coming," she said quietly. "Too soon, but babies choose their own time. We prepare for the worst and pray for the best." Jacob refused to leave Ayana's side, holding her hand through each contraction, wiping her face with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement and love. Kimi sat in the corner, her small face frightened but determined to be brave. "Go slow. It hurts," Ayana gasped during a particularly fierce contraction. "I know, love. I know." Jacob's eyes were wet. "You're the strongest person I've ever met. You can do this." "What if the baby—" "Don't!" Jacob pressed his forehead to hers. "Don't borrow tomorrow's troubles. Right now, in this moment, you're both alive. Focus on that." The labor lasted through the night and into the next day. Just when Ayana thought she couldn't endure another moment, couldn't push again, couldn't survive another wave of pain, Maria said, "One more push and you'll meet your daughter." Daughter. The word gave Ayana strength she didn't know she possessed. With Jacob's hand crushing hers and his voice in her ear, "Together we do this together," she bore down with everything she had, and then a cry, thin and reedy but unmistakably alive. "It's a girl," Maria said, her voice thick with emotion. Small but strong, fighting already. They placed the tiny bundle on Ayana's chest, and the world stopped. Her daughter was impossibly small, fitting in one of Jacob's large hands. Her skin was dusky and wrinkled, her eyes sealed shut, her fingers no bigger than toothpicks, but she was breathing, living theirs. "She's perfect," Jacob whispered, tears streaming down his face as he touched the baby's downy head. "Absolutely perfect." "So small," Ayana breathed, terror and love warring in her chest. "Will she survive?" "We'll make sure she does," Maria promised. "Premature babies are fighters. And this one, she has your blood, your strength. She'll make it." They named her Tallulah Rose, leaping water in Apache, and Rose for Jacob's sister. She spent her first weeks in a basket near the fire, wrapped in soft blankets and requiring constant care. Ayana barely slept, waking every 2 hours to nurse the baby, checking constantly to make sure she was still breathing. Jacob was equally devoted, walking the floor with Tallulah when she cried, singing her old cavalry songs in his rumbling voice, standing guard over his tiny daughter like she was the most precious thing in the world, because she was. Kimi adapted to big sisterhood with fierce protectiveness. She'd sit by the basket for hours, talking to Tallulah about horses and birds and all the things they'd do together when the baby was bigger. "I'll teach you to ride," she promised, "and Mother will teach you the old stories, and Father will keep us all safe. You'll see." Slowly, Tallulah grew. Each ounce of weight was celebrated. Each week survived a victory. By the time she was 2 months old, she'd gained enough strength to nurse efficiently and sleep for longer stretches. Her eyes opened to reveal Jacob's blue, startling and bright against her bronze skin. "She has the best of both of us," Jacob marveled, watching his daughter track his movements with growing awareness. "Your beauty, my stubbornness. Your kindness," Ayana corrected. "My survival instinct." "Our love," Jacob said, pulling her close. "That's what she'll carry forward, not the hate or prejudice that tried to keep us apart, but the love that brought us together." The schoolhouse opened in September, just as autumn painted the hills gold and crimson. 12 students enrolled that first term, Apache, white, Mexican, Chinese, ages ranging from 6 to 14, all eager to learn. Ayana stood at the front of the classroom on opening day, Tallulah secured in a sling against her chest, and looked at the diverse faces before her. Sophia Henderson sat in the front row. Kimmy beamed from her seat near the window, and scattered throughout were children who'd been denied education because of who they were or where they came from. "Welcome," Ayana said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "This school exists because we believe all children deserve knowledge, deserve opportunity, deserve respect, no matter their heritage. Here, we learn together, we grow together, we build a future together." From the back of the room, Jacob watched with pride shining in his eyes. Samuel and Maria stood with him, along with Tom Henderson and his wife, Father O'Brien, and a dozen other community members who'd come to witness history being made. "Today we start something new," Ayana continued. "Not just a school, but a promise. That our children will inherit a world better than the one we found, where love matters more than prejudice, where courage means building bridges instead of walls." She looked at Jacob, and he nodded. The gesture that had become their silent communication, their wordless affirmation of shared purpose and unshakable partnership. "Let's begin," Ayana said, and opened the first book. The months that followed weren't perfect. There were complaints from some townspeople about mixing the races. A few parents withdrew their children after the first week. Some ranchers refused to do business with Jacob because of his Indian school. But more stayed than left, more supported than condemned, and slowly, grudgingly, the school became an accepted part of the community, then a source of pride as students excelled and parents saw their children reading, writing, calculating with confidence. One evening, as winter approached again and the first snow dusted the hills, Ayana stood on the porch, watching Jacob teach Kimmy to rope fence posts. Tallulah slept against her shoulder, warm and content. In the distance, she could see the schoolhouse, smoke rising from its chimney, where Father O'Brien was preparing the next day's lessons. Everything she'd lost, her first wedding, her tribe, her original dreams, had led her here. To this man, this family, this purpose. The pain hadn't been erased, but it had been transformed into something meaningful, something that would outlast her. "What are you thinking?" Jacob asked, climbing the steps to join her. He dropped the rope to come investigate her contemplative expression. "That I'm grateful." Ayana leaned against him, fitting perfectly into the curve of his arm. "For all of it, even the hard parts, because they led me to you." A young Apache bride was stranded with a seasoned cowboy, Jacob murmured, quoting the words people sometimes whispered about their story, and that night turned her into a woman. "No," Ayana corrected gently. "That night, we became partners. We built this together, every bit of it. The home, the family, the school. I was already a woman when I met you. You just helped me remember my strength." Jacob kissed her temple. "Fair correction. You were always strong. I just got lucky enough to witness it." From the yard, Kimmy called out, "Father, I did it. I roped it perfect." "That's my girl," Jacob called back. Then, softer to Ayana, "Our girl. Both of them. Our impossible, perfect family." Tallulah stirred and yawned, her tiny face scrunching up before settling back into sleep. Ayana touched her daughter's cheek with infinite tenderness. "Tomorrow I teach them about Apache creation stories," she said, "and geometry, and how to treat everyone with respect regardless of who they are. Tomorrow I fix the north fence and start expanding the barn for spring calves." Jacob's hand covered hers on Tallulah's back. "And every day I'll thank whatever force brought you to my door that desperate day." "Gold isn't what we need here." Ayana quoted his first words to her. "You were right. What we needed was each other." "What we needed was courage," Jacob countered. "Yours to trust again. Mine to see beyond what I'd been taught. What we found was love. the kind that weathers storms and builds futures. They stood together as twilight deepened, watching their daughter learn, holding their baby, surrounded by the evidence of their shared work and shared love. In the distance, mountains stood eternal against the sky. Somewhere ancestors watched and approved, and tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys, all to be faced the same way they'd faced everything, together, always together. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Ayanna and Jacob's journey? Your feedback means the world to us. The